Boker Tov, everyone. Rabbi Eric Solomon here, Raleigh, North Carolina. On a beautiful morning, pardon the lawn mowing going next door, our neighbor next door. Hopefully you can still hear me. A little more morning Torah. So the parsha this week, Bamidbar Sinai, is the beginning of the book of Numbers. And it talks about really our journey in the wilderness. And it's a census taking, getting us ready to enter the promised land. And one of the classic questions, not only for this parsha, Bamidbar, but also as we enter the holiday of Shavuot next week, which is the holiday of receiving the Torah, Matan, or the giving of the Torah, is why was the Torah given in the desert? Why not give the Torah in the cities? Why not give where it would be probably easily more people are? Why wasn't the Torah given in the land of Israel, where the holiness and the sanctity and the importance of Israel would be to us? We imagine that's where the Torah should be given. So why is it given in the wilderness of Sinai, in the desert of Sinai, which is not necessarily it's not our land, it's not our historical land, it's the Holy Land, etc. And it's in the middle of Nowheresville. So there are many explanations given for this question. It's been going on for thousands of years. Well, we should be ownerless like the desert. The desert's not owned by anyone. It's not just by one particular people, and therefore it should be that way. It's hefker. Some say the wilderness because we had to go through the land, we had to go through Egypt and kind of get our way out, become a people, become unified, to receive it properly, as a people, be prepared. So one of the answers that I love about this midrash or question is that in the desert, things are open. It's open like the desert. It's open. Yeah, it's open like the desert. It's an open space. It's a wide open space. And in order to receive Torah, really to receive any kind of communication, whether it's from another human being or in life or from the Holy One, from places beyond ourselves, we have to be open. We have to be open to let things come into our ears, to listen. We have to be curious, want to let something in, to be vulnerable, and then we have to let it enter not only to our intellect, but into our heart, into our neshamas, into our souls. And that's what the desert represents, an openness. So, I want to offer this teaching in light of this horrible, horrific week with the conflict and rockets and suffering that is happening in the state of Israel and throughout the Palestinian territories, really in Gaza as well. Look, I don't have a hot take. I'm not a political scientist, and I don't pretend to have some kind of answers or explanations about all aspects. I just want to bring in one aspect of what it means to be open, to be curious. That in the desert, after we were free to receive the Torah, we still were scared, our people. We still were nervous. We just been freed after hundreds of years of oppression. The desert's also a place of danger. It's a very vulnerable place. It's not an easy place to be so open. But God said, look, you have to be open. You have to receive Torah. You have to open up your ears. You open your hearts. Right now in Israel, and I absolutely have, and I'm privileged to have Palestinian connections and friends and great sympathy for the Palestinian narrative. My family is the Jewish people. My family, my friends, are with my brothers and sisters in Israel. And I want to say that the issue of openness in this moment, what I've seen from some of my colleagues and friends, those who are close to me and I care about deeply, is that in this moment when rockets are being fired and there's an incredible sense of vulnerability. Just this morning I read that there was a 5-year-old child who sadly was killed, an Israeli child, Jewish child, near Gaza by a rocket, and the funeral is this morning or this afternoon in Israel. And during the funeral, rockets were fired, and people, while the funeral was going on, you can imagine the devastation. There are rockets. They had to go on the floor, on the ground, and that feeling of not having being so scared, when in a place of deep fear, is not a place when human beings can be open. And I say that not only for Israelis, but also for Palestinians, for those living in Gaza, which I myself have never visited, but I can only imagine that when rockets are coming in, and there are innocent Palestinians as well, that this is not a time of openness, not a time for vulnerability. And this idea that some, in their commentaries, I see through social media, through posts, on the left, those who, generally speaking, I'm more sympathetic to the narrative, saying that Israel has to be open to the narrative of Palestinians. but are demanding a certain openness to hear and to think about this moment when Israelis are cowering in bomb shelters, worried for their lives. The ability to be open is not possible when you're in a place of ultimate fear. To me, it reminds me, for example, like during the insurrection, when people were coming at the Capitol and police were trying to defend the Capitol, worried for the safety of our representatives. In that moment, all the police were trying to do was to protect their own lives, protect the lives of others, protect the lives of our representatives. Afterwards, we have heard analysis about why the insurrection occurred, why certain people felt called to Washington, how the President Trump played a role, the anger and upset of certain Americans, their place. Doesn't excuse it, but we can understand, we can get into and be curious and open. Why would people do such behavior that supposedly are patriotic Americans to essentially destroy and attack our country? Why would they do that? But in the moment, not interested in why they're reasoning, they're committing an act of violence. They are threatening people's lives. They must be stopped. If someone in that moment of the insurrection said, don't act this way, let's talk about the reasons, I'd say, no, we're not talking about the reasons. We are stopping them now. We are saving lives. And later, we can be curious, potentially, about why they did what they did and hold them responsible. I can give you a million examples of this. When there was attacks on a synagogue in Pittsburgh, Poway, while the white supremacist was going and shooting and killing innocent Jews praying, is not the time to discuss what is the anger of white supremacists, why were they against the Jewish community, what is the roots of their anti-Semitism. There may be all kinds of reasons for that, none of them excusable, but we could try to understand, be curious, be open to why would someone act in such a way. What is the resentment of some white Americans, some who think this way about the Jewish community or about immigrants? We could be curious later. But in the moment, this man is a killer. He's a murderer. An anti-Semite. I'm not interested in your explanations of where he comes from. I want to protect human life. I can't be open. No human being can be open when in the middle of their life being threatened or actually being maimed or, God forbid, killed. So I've got friends on the left who in this moment step back, who are not in situ, who's in bashetach, as they say, and say, let's think, why are there Hamas doing this? Why is Islamic Jihad doing this? Why are the Palestinians in general? Why are Palestinian Israelis, why are they acting in such a way? It is true. There are reasons. Some of them extremely important for us to hear and understand. Not agree, but hear and understand, be curious. But it's impossible to be open when the rockets are flying and people are being killed. On the other side, to my other members of the Jewish community, American Jewish community. In this moment, I'm with you that openness is extremely difficult, if not impossible. However, when this please God passes, and prior to this, your inability, unwillingness to be curious and to be open, to hear the narrative of why some Palestinians feel their experience, where they are coming from, not necessarily to agree, but to be open to hear their Torah, so to speak, in itself is also a sin. And to some degree, what is coming now is a result of an inability of both sides to be open when it was possible, to listen, to be curious, to receive the Torah of the other. So what's my message ultimately? If I have a Torah hot take, and I say that with a joke because I don't have a hot take. I'm sitting here suffering and confused and upset. Is that to receive Torah in the desert, to receive it on Shavuot, to receive the Torah, receive any type of deep wisdom requires openness, vulnerability, an ability to open your ears and open your heart. That can't happen when your life is threatened. But when your life is not under threat, immediate threat, it's requisite. And that's why Torah was given in the desert, because it is telling us that we have to open ourselves to the other, to the narrative, to learn in order to grow, in order to truly seek the highest level of Torah, all its paths are peace. And that's upon all sides, all directions. is to open their heart to receive that Torah, whether it's the true traditional Torah or the Torah Chaim, the Torah that we see in life. I pray this Shabbat for my brothers and sisters in Israel, for peace and shalom. I pray for safety, for courage, for strength, but also for my Palestinian friends and for those who are suffering and caught in innocence in between, for them too to feel safety and peace. I pray for all of them to get to a place soon and quickly where openness can return. But until then, I don't begrudge anyone in a place of being scared to say, I'm not ready to receive that Torah. I can only get there when at least calm is returned. Please, God, may that be speedily and in our days. Shabbat Shalom and early Chag Sameach. Until next time.